My father-in-law fired me during a board meeting for questioning his decision. He didn't know I recorded everything. Robert Davenport fired me in front of the entire board on a Wednesday in September. I'd been CFO of Davenport Industries for 6 years, married to his daughter for 8. The meeting was about a merger with Lexington Corp, a deal worth $200 million. Robert presented the financials, inflated revenue projections by 40%, buried critical debt disclosures on page 87 of a 200-page document. I raised my hand during the presentation. Robert paused mid-sentence and looked at me. The Lexington numbers don't match our due diligence reports. We're showing them revenue they don't actually have. The room went silent. 12 board members stared. Robert's face turned red. Are you questioning my integrity in front of this board? I stayed calm. I'm questioning the accuracy of these projections. Our audit team found discrepancies. Robert slammed his folder shut. You're fired. Security will escort you out. Clear your office by end of day. I sat there stunned. The board members looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Robert's assistant called security. 2 guards appeared within minutes. I stood up, gathered my papers, walked out with them flanking me. My phone was vibrating in my pocket. Text from my wife, Allison. What happened? Dad just called me. I didn't respond yet. First, I needed to get to my car. The security guards watched me pack my office. 20 minutes to gather 6 years of work into cardboard boxes, photos of Allison and our daughter on my desk, commendations from the company, files I'd built. One guard checked his watch repeatedly. The other stood by the door. I took my personal laptop, the framed photo of my family, some files that belonged to me, left the company property behind. They walked me to the parking garage, watched me load my car, waited until I drove away. I pulled into a coffee shop parking lot 3 blocks from the office and finally checked my phone. 7 missed calls from Allison. 3 texts. The last one said, "Please call me. I don't understand what's happening." I called her. She answered on the first ring. "David, what did you do?" "Not what happened to you. What did you do?" "I questioned the merger numbers in the board meeting. Your father fired me on the spot." Allison was quiet for a moment. "He said you undermined him, accused him of fraud in front of investors." That wasn't what I'd said, but Robert was already controlling the narrative. I pointed out discrepancies in the financials. That's my job as CFO. She sighed. "Can you just apologize? Maybe he'll reconsider." I felt anger building. Apologize for doing my job correctly? She got defensive. "He built that company from nothing. You embarrassed him." I realized she was taking his side without even hearing mine. I drove home instead of continuing the argument. Our house was in Preston Heights, a neighborhood we could barely afford on my salary alone. Mortgage was $4,800 a month. Car payments, private school for our daughter Emma, all the expenses Robert had encouraged us to take on. "Your family," he'd said. "You'll always have a place at Davenport Industries." Now I had no income and bills due in 2 weeks. I sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. The house was quiet. Emma was at school. I went to my home office and pulled out the external hard drive I kept in my desk drawer. I'd been documenting everything for 8 months. Robert's pattern of financial manipulation started small, adjusting quarterly numbers by a few percentage points, hiding losses in subsidiaries, misrepresenting contracts to make earnings look better. Then it escalated. The Lexington merger was the worst yet. He was selling the board and investors a completely false picture. I had recordings of meetings where he explicitly told the accounting team to manipulate the numbers, emails where he ordered document alterations, spreadsheets showing the real financials versus what he presented. I'd started recording after a conversation in July where Robert told me directly to falsify a report for the board. "Make the numbers work, David. I don't care how." I'd refused. He'd gotten angry, said I was being difficult, that I needed to be a team player. I spent the afternoon organizing the evidence. 47 audio recordings, 236 emails, 31 document versions showing alterations, financial spreadsheets with his handwritten notes, ordering changes. I'd been meticulous. Every meeting where he discussed fraud, I'd recorded on my phone in my pocket. Every email he sent with illegal instructions, I'd forwarded to a private account. Every document he'd ordered changed. I'd kept the originals. Robert thought firing me would solve his problem. He had no idea I'd been building a case against him for months. My phone rang. Allison calling again. I answered. She sounded upset. "Dad wants to talk to you. He's willing to offer a severance package if you sign an NDA. Translation, he wants to pay me to stay quiet." "How much?" I asked. Allison hesitated. 6 months' salary, $180,000. But you have to agree not to disparage the company or discuss internal business. I did the math quickly. 6 months would barely cover our expenses while I looked for another job. "I'll think about it." Allison's voice got sharp. "David, don't be stupid. Take the money. Move on." I told her I'd call her back and hung up. Took the severance and stay quiet, or report what I knew and blow up my wife's family. The choice seemed obvious an hour ago. Now, sitting in my house thinking about Emma's school and our mortgage, it felt more complicated. Allison came home at 6 with Emma. Our daughter ran to me for a hug, completely unaware of anything wrong. Allison sent her upstairs to do homework. Then she sat across from me at the kitchen table. "Are you going to take the severance?" I looked at my wife. 8 years of marriage. We'd met at a company event when I first joined Davenport Industries. She was smart, beautiful, shared my values, or so I'd thought. Now she was asking me to take money in exchange for covering up her father's crimes. "Your father is committing securities fraud. The Lexington deal will cost investors millions. People will lose their retirement savings." Allison's expression hardened. "You don't know that. Dad's been running this company for 30 years. He knows what he's doing." I pulled up a spreadsheet on my laptop and turned it toward her. "This is what he's showing the board. This is the real data. The difference is $80 million in fabricated revenue." She barely looked at it. "You're not a forensic accountant. Maybe you're misunderstanding something." I realized she wasn't going to listen. Her loyalty was to her father, not to the truth. "If I take the severance and sign the NDA, I'm complicit in fraud. I could lose my CPA license. I could go to jail." Allison stood up. "You're being dramatic. Just take the money and find another job. Stop trying to destroy my family." I didn't sleep that night. Lay in bed next to Allison, staring at the ceiling. She'd made her position clear. Take the money, protect her father, betray everything I'd built my career on. By morning, I'd made my decision. I got up early before Allison woke, made coffee and sat at my laptop, drafted an email to the Securities and Exchange Commission with every piece of evidence attached. 47 audio files, 236 emails, 31 document versions, financial analyses showing the fraud, a detailed timeline of Robert's manipulation. I included my contact information and a statement that I was willing to testify. My finger hovered over the send button for 5 minutes. Once I sent this, there was no going back. Robert would know I'd betrayed him. Allison would never forgive me. Her entire family would turn against me. But investors would lose everything if I stayed quiet. Retirement funds would evaporate. People who trusted Robert would be ruined. I pressed send. The email went through. I sat back and waited. The SEC doesn't move fast, but they move thoroughly. I knew they'd open an investigation within days. Would probably take weeks or months before any public action. I had time to prepare. Allison found me in my office an hour later. "Did you decide about the severance?" I turned to face her. "I reported your father to the SEC. Her face went pale. "You did what?" I explained calmly. "I sent them evidence of securities fraud, the manipulated financials, the recordings, everything." She started shaking. "David, how could you? That's my father. That's my family's company." I stood up. "He's breaking the law. People will lose everything if this merger goes through." Allison's shock turned to rage. "Get out! Get out of this house right now!" I'd expected this, but it still hurt. "Allison, I did the right thing." She was crying now, angry tears. "The right thing? You just destroyed my family, Emma's grandfather, our entire life. Get out!" I grabbed my laptop and the external hard drive, took some clothes from our bedroom while she stood in the hallway crying. Emma heard the commotion and came out of her room. "Daddy, where are you going?" I hugged her tight. "I have to go away for a little while, sweetheart, but I love you very much." Allison pulled Emma away from me. "Go, now." I walked out of my house with one bag of clothes and my evidence, drove to a hotel near the highway and checked in for a week. Sat on the bed in a generic room and wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The SEC contacted me 3 days later. An investigator named Catherine Russo called my cell phone. "Mr. Palmer, we received your complaint. We'd like to meet with you to discuss the evidence." We met at a federal building downtown on Monday morning. Catherine brought 2 other investigators. They spent 4 hours going through everything I'd provided, played the audio recordings where Robert explicitly ordered fraud, read through emails with his instructions to manipulate numbers, examined the document alterations. Catherine made detailed notes. "This is substantial, Mr. Palmer. We'll need you to provide sworn testimony." I agreed to everything. They asked about my relationship with Robert, why I'd started documenting. I explained the escalation, how it went from small adjustments to outright fabrication, how I'd refused to participate and been fired for it. Catherine looked at the timeline. "The Lexington merger is scheduled to close in 6 weeks," I confirmed. "Robert's rushing it through before anyone can examine the real numbers." She made another note. "We'll need to move quickly. Can you remain available for additional meetings?" I told her I had nothing but time. No job, no family, nothing but a hotel room, and the truth. She thanked me for coming forward, said most people in my position would have taken the money and stayed quiet. Robert found out about the investigation 2 weeks later. The SEC sent him a formal notice requesting documents and testimony. He called me immediately, left a voicemail. "You piece of garbage. You went to the SEC after everything I did for you? You're finished. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." I saved the voicemail as evidence of retaliation. He called Allison next. She texted me that night. "Dad knows what you did. He's hiring lawyers. You're going to regret this." I didn't respond. What was there to say? I'd chosen the law over her family. She'd chosen her father over the truth. Our marriage was effectively over. My lawyer, someone Catherine had recommended, told me Robert would try to destroy my reputation. "He'll spread rumors, tell people you're incompetent or mentally unstable. Be prepared for a character assassination campaign." It started within days. Former colleagues stopped responding to my calls. LinkedIn connections blocked me. I heard through a friend that Robert was telling everyone I'd been stealing from the company, that I'd falsified records to cover it up. Complete lies, but effective. My professional reputation was being demolished while I waited for the SEC investigation to conclude. I spent my days in the hotel room, living on savings, waiting for something to happen. The SEC moved faster than I expected. 6 weeks after my initial report, they filed an emergency action to halt the Lexington merger. Robert was furious. The board held an emergency meeting. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from a source who still talked to me. Robert claimed the SEC investigation was baseless, that I'd fabricated evidence because I was angry about being fired. He insisted the board proceed with the merger. 3 board members resigned on the spot. They'd seen the SEC filing, read the preliminary findings. They knew Robert was lying. The remaining board members voted to suspend Robert as CEO pending the investigation outcome. He refused to leave, showed up to the office the next day like nothing happened. The board called security and had him physically removed from the building. Photos of Robert being escorted out went viral internally. The man who'd fired me in front of everyone was now being dragged out himself. Allison called me screaming. "Are you happy now? They forced Dad out of his own company. He built that company from nothing and you destroyed it." I tried to explain that Robert destroyed it himself through fraud, but she hung up on me. I sat in the hotel room looking at photos of Emma on my phone, wondering when I'd see my daughter again. Catherine called with an update in November. "We've completed the preliminary investigation. The evidence is overwhelming. We're moving forward with formal charges." Robert would face multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and making false statements. Each charge carried years in prison and millions in fines. The Lexington merger was permanently blocked. Investors who'd trusted Robert's projections were demanding answers. Class action lawsuits were being filed. The company's stock dropped 60% in a single day. Allison sent me a letter through her attorney. Divorce papers. She wanted full custody of Emma, child support, and half of everything we owned. She cited my betrayal of the family and psychological instability as grounds. My lawyer said the custody claim was weak. "You did nothing wrong. You reported a crime. That's not grounds for losing custody." But I knew Allison had resources I didn't. Robert's money, his lawyers, his connections. I was living in a hotel on dwindling savings. The divorce and custody battle would bankrupt me. I signed the papers agreeing to reasonable custody, child support based on my previous income even though I was unemployed, and a fair division of assets. I wasn't going to fight Allison in court. I just wanted to see my daughter. The federal trial started in February. Robert had hired an expensive defense team. They argued I'd manipulated the evidence, that the recordings were edited, that I'd fabricated emails. The prosecution brought in forensic analysts who confirmed everything was authentic, played the recordings in court. Robert's voice clearly ordering fraud. "Make the numbers work. I don't care what you have to do." The jury heard him instructing accountants to hide losses, telling executives to lie to investors, ordering the destruction of documents. His lawyers tried to claim he was joking or using business hyperbole. Nobody believed them. I testified for 2 days. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. "Isn't it true you were fired for incompetence?" I looked at the jury. "I was fired for refusing to commit fraud." The prosecutor showed my employment record. 6 years of excellent performance reviews, bonuses, promotions, commendations. No history of problems until I'd refused to falsify the Lexington numbers. The defense attorney tried a different angle. "You recorded your father-in-law secretly, betrayed your wife's family. That shows character problems, doesn't it?" I stayed calm. "It shows I prioritize following the law over personal relationships." The jury deliberated for 8 hours, found Robert guilty on all counts. The judge set sentencing for 6 weeks later. Robert was released on bail but ordered to surrender his passport. I sat in the courtroom watching him leave in handcuffs, surrounded by his lawyers and family. Allison glared at me from across the room. Her mother wouldn't even look in my direction. I felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion. This had cost me my marriage, my relationship with my daughter, my career, and my savings. But dozens of investors had been protected from losing everything. The Lexington merger would have destroyed retirement accounts and college funds. Robert's fraud would have ruined lives. I'd stopped it, but the personal cost was devastating. Catherine found me in the hallway after the verdict. "You did the right thing, Mr. Palmer. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you saved a lot of people." I thanked her and went back to my hotel. The trial had drained my savings. I had maybe 3 weeks before I'd need to find cheaper housing. No job prospects, no family. Just the knowledge that I'd told the truth and let the system do its work. Robert was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $47 million in restitution. His lawyers filed appeals immediately, but the judge denied bail pending appeal. Robert would start serving his sentence right away. Davenport Industries was sold to a competitor for pennies on the dollar. Hundreds of employees lost their jobs. Allison blamed me for all of it in increasingly vicious text messages. "You destroyed hundreds of families. Dad's in prison because of you. I hope you're proud." I wanted to explain that Robert destroyed those jobs by committing fraud, that I'd just exposed it. But there was no point. She'd made up her mind. I was the villain in her story. The divorce finalized in April. I got supervised visitation with Emma every other weekend. Allison fought to make it supervised, claiming I was a dangerous influence. The judge saw through it and granted reasonable custody, but Allison filed for modification immediately. She was determined to cut me out of Emma's life completely. I moved into a small apartment across town. 1 bedroom, bare walls, secondhand furniture. My life had shrunk to almost nothing. I spent my days applying for jobs and being rejected. Robert's smear campaign had been effective. No company wanted to hire the whistleblower who destroyed his father-in-law's empire. I finally found work in July at a small nonprofit handling their accounting. The salary was $65,000, less than half what I'd made at Davenport Industries. But it was honest work for good people. My boss, a woman named Rebecca Chen, knew my history. She'd Googled me before the interview. I read about the trial. You did the right thing. I almost cried hearing someone say that. Everyone else treated me like a traitor or a troublemaker. Rebecca offered me the job on the spot. We need someone with integrity. That's hard to find. The nonprofit did financial literacy education for low-income families. We taught budgeting, credit management, basic investing. The work was meaningful, even if the pay was terrible. I started rebuilding my life one piece at a time. Small apartment, modest car, simple routines. Emma came to visit every other weekend. She was confused about why Mommy and Daddy didn't live together anymore. I told her the truth in age-appropriate terms. Daddy had to tell the truth about something at work. Grandpa got in trouble. Mommy is very sad about it. Emma looked at me with her serious 8-year-old face. Did Grandpa do something bad? I nodded. Yes, sweetheart, he did. She hugged me. You're a good daddy. That made everything worth it. Allison's anger didn't fade. She filed modification after modification trying to reduce my custody, claimed I couldn't provide a stable home, said my job was too demanding, argued Emma was confused and stressed after visits with me. Every claim was lies, but each one required a court response and legal fees I couldn't afford. My lawyer worked pro bono after the 3rd modification. She's harassing you through the courts. The judge will see that eventually. It took 18 months, but finally a judge dismissed Allison's latest petition and warned her against further frivolous filings. Mr. Palmer has demonstrated consistent, appropriate parenting. These modifications are without merit and will not be entertained further. Allison left the courtroom furious. I left relieved. Emma was 10 now, old enough to understand more. She'd started asking questions about what Grandpa did, why he was in prison. I answered honestly, but gently. Explained that he'd lied about money at his company, that lying is wrong even if someone important does it. Emma processed this quietly. A week later, she told me she was proud of me for telling the truth. Even though it made people mad at you. I hugged her tight. My daughter understood what my wife never would. The class action lawsuits against Robert and Davenport Industries settled 2 years after the criminal trial. The investors who'd been defrauded received partial restitution. Not everything they'd lost, but something. Several of them reached out to thank me. One man, a retired teacher, wrote a letter. You saved my pension. If that merger had gone through, I'd have lost everything. Thank you for your courage. I kept the letter in my desk drawer. Read it on hard days when I questioned whether the sacrifice had been worth it. Rebecca promoted me to director of finance at the nonprofit. My salary increased to $85,000, still far below what I'd made before, but enough to live comfortably. I'd adjusted to a simpler life. Smaller apartment, used car, modest expenses. No more trying to keep up with the lifestyle Robert had pushed on us. I was happier now than I'd been in years. The stress of watching Robert's fraud and feeling powerless was gone. The fear of being caught in his schemes had evaporated. I'd chosen integrity over money, truth over family loyalty, and I slept well at night. Allison and I barely spoke, except about Emma's schedule. Her anger had cooled into cold indifference. She'd remarried, a lawyer from her father's defense team. I felt nothing about it. Our marriage had ended the moment she'd chosen Robert over ethics. Emma turned 13 and told her mother she wanted to spend more time with me. Allison fought it, but Emma was old enough for her preference to matter. The custody arrangement shifted to a more balanced schedule. Emma told me she was tired of her mother bad-mouthing me. Mom acts like you're a bad person, but you're not. You're the one who tells the truth. I didn't encourage Emma to disrespect her mother, but I also didn't contradict her observations. Allison had spent years trying to poison our daughter against me. It hadn't worked. Emma had seen both of us clearly and made her own judgments. Robert's appeals were exhausted by year 4. He would serve his full sentence, reduced slightly for good behavior. He'd be eligible for parole in 8 years. His lawyers tried everything, claiming judicial misconduct, tainted evidence, prosecutorial overreach. Every appeal was denied. The evidence was too strong. His own voice on recordings ordering fraud, his own handwriting on documents, his own emails instructing criminal acts. There was no defense. The man who'd built an empire through deception was spending his final years in prison. Allison visited him regularly, told Emma about how sad and weak Grandpa looked. Emma asked me once if I felt bad about it. Grandpa's in prison because of what you told, right? I chose my words carefully. Grandpa's in prison because of what he did. I just made sure people knew the truth. A reporter contacted me 5 years after the trial. She was writing a book about corporate fraud and wanted to interview me. I agreed. We met at a coffee shop and she asked about my decision to come forward. You lost everything. Your marriage, your career, your financial stability. Was it worth it? I thought about it. I lost some things, but I kept my integrity. I kept my relationship with my daughter. I kept my ability to sleep at night knowing I'd done the right thing. So yes, it was worth it. The reporter asked if I'd do anything differently. I would have documented everything sooner, started building the case earlier, maybe prevented more of the fraud. She published the book 8 months later. An entire chapter focused on my case. The book became a minor bestseller in business circles. I started getting speaking invitations. Business schools wanted me to talk to students about ethical decision-making. Corporations wanted me to train their finance teams on fraud detection. I accepted some of the invitations, stood in front of rooms full of young professionals, and told my story. When you see fraud, you have 3 choices: participate, stay silent, or report it. Only one of those lets you sleep at night. Students asked how to balance ethics with career advancement. I told them the truth. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything. You have to decide what kind of person you want to be. Catherine Russo called me 6 years after the trial. She'd left the SEC and was working for a consulting firm that helped companies strengthen their compliance programs. We're looking for someone with real-world experience, someone who understands fraud from the inside. Interested? The salary was $150,000, more than I'd made at Davenport Industries. The work involved reviewing corporate controls, training executives, identifying red flags, using everything I'd learned from watching Robert's fraud to help companies prevent it. I accepted immediately. Gave Rebecca notice at the nonprofit. She was happy for me. You deserve this. You've rebuilt your life the right way. I moved to a better apartment, bought a reliable car, started paying down the debt I'd accumulated during the unemployment and legal battles. For the first time since the board meeting where Robert fired me, I felt stable. The consulting work was demanding but fulfilling. I reviewed financial controls at major corporations, found weaknesses, recommended improvements, trained CFOs and controllers on fraud detection. Every company I helped was one fewer potential Robert Davenport situation, one fewer group of investors who'd lose everything. Emma was 16 now, thinking about college. She wanted to study criminal justice. I want to help catch people who do bad things, like Grandpa. I was proud of her, even though Allison hated the career choice. She's choosing this to hurt me, Allison told me during a custody discussion. I disagreed. She's choosing it because she believes in justice. Robert was released on parole after 9 years. He'd served most of his sentence, gotten out slightly early for good behavior. He was 68, broken, bankrupt. Everything he'd built was gone. His company had been dissolved. His wealth had been seized for restitution. His reputation was destroyed. He moved into a small apartment and got a job at a hardware store. Allison tried to rebuild their relationship, but Robert was different now. Prison had changed him. He was quiet, defeated, avoided talking about the past. Emma refused to see him. He's a criminal. He hurt people. I don't want a relationship with him. Allison begged, but Emma was 18 and made her own choices. I didn't encourage or discourage her, just supported whatever she decided. Robert tried to contact me once, sent a letter to my office. I've had 9 years to think about what happened. You were right. I was wrong. The fraud, the lies, all of it. I destroyed everything, including my relationship with my daughter and granddaughter. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know I understand now what I cost everyone. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. Maybe he'd genuinely changed. Maybe prison had given him perspective, but it didn't undo the damage he'd caused or the choices I'd had to make. 10 years after the board meeting, I was speaking at a conference about corporate ethics. Emma, now 21 and in college studying forensic accounting, came to watch. I told the story of questioning Robert's numbers, being fired publicly, making the decision to report the fraud, losing everything, and rebuilding slowly. The audience of several hundred finance professionals listened intently. During the quanda, someone asked if I'd do it again, knowing the cost. I looked at Emma sitting in the third row, smiled, and answered. Every single time, because some things matter more than money or comfort or family loyalty. The truth matters. Protecting people from predators matters. Being able to look your children in the eye and tell them you did the right thing matters. Robert Davenport fired me for questioning his fraud. He thought that would silence me. Instead, it freed me to stop him. I lost a career, a marriage, years of financial stability. But I kept my integrity. I kept my relationship with my daughter. And dozens of investors kept their retirement savings. So yes, I'd do it again. The room erupted in applause. After the speech, several young professionals approached me with their own stories of witnessing fraud and struggling with whether to report it. I gave them all the same advice. Document everything, build your case carefully, and report it through proper channels. Then prepare for the consequences and stand firm. Emma and I got dinner after the conference. She was thriving in college, top of her class, already had internship offers from accounting firms and federal agencies. I want to do what you did, Dad. Catch the bad guys. Stop people from getting hurt. I told her I was proud of her, that she'd make an excellent forensic accountant. She asked if I'd heard about Robert. He's sick. Cancer. Mom's devastated. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Robert had destroyed my life and hurt countless others, but he'd also been my father-in-law once, part of my family. I'm sorry to hear that, Emma nodded. Mom asked if I'd visit him. I told her no. I asked if she was sure about that decision. You might regret it later. Emma shook her head. He made his choices. I'm making mine. I don't owe him forgiveness just because he's dying. I understood. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. Robert died 4 months later. Allison called to tell me. I offered condolences. She accepted them coldly, then hung up. I didn't attend the funeral. Neither did Emma. We'd both moved on from that chapter of our lives. Years passed. My consulting firm grew. Emma graduated with honors, got a job with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. She called me after her first major case, a securities fraud investigation that resulted in multiple convictions. I thought about you the whole time, Dad, about how you taught me that doing the right thing is worth the cost. That conversation meant more than any award or recognition I'd ever received. My daughter had learned the most important lesson from watching my choices. Integrity isn't free, but it's priceless. Allison and I eventually reached a civil relationship. Not friendly, but no longer hostile. She'd remarried, was happy, had made peace with the past in her own way. She never apologized for choosing her father over the truth, but she stopped blaming me for his imprisonment. Sometimes that's the best reconciliation you can hope for. I remarried at 52 to a woman I met through work. She knew my entire history, respected the choices I'd made, built a life with me based on shared values rather than money or status. We were happy in a quiet, stable way that my first marriage never was. 20 years after Robert fired me in that board meeting, I retired from consulting, spent my final working years training the next generation of ethical finance professionals, wrote a book about corporate fraud prevention that became required reading in business schools. Emma had risen to senior investigator at the FBI, had taken down multiple fraud schemes, saved billions in potential losses. She credited our family's history for teaching her what matters: the cost of speaking truth to power, the importance of evidence and documentation, the courage required to stand alone against corruption. Robert Davenport thought firing me would protect his secrets. Instead, it freed me to expose them. The recordings I'd made, the documents I'd saved, the evidence I'd gathered destroyed his empire but saved countless others from ruin. I'd paid an enormous personal price, lost my marriage, my career, years of financial security. But I'd kept something more valuable: my integrity, my principles, my ability to look in the mirror and respect what I saw. And I'd raised a daughter who understood that some truths are worth telling, regardless of the cost. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.